Cate Blanchett, Richard Roxburgh, welcome.
Thank you.
Why Chekhov? Why Uncle Vanya? Do you remember the moment where you said to yourself, yes, let's do this project?
Well, Andrew Upton and I, who run the Sydney Theatre Company, the company has had a long history of reinterpreting the classics as well as doing new Australian work. And when you come to the company, you think, there's some great plays that you'd like to do. And when you think about doing Chekhov, you have to have actors. It's all actor-based. And so it really arose out of a conversation with Richard, trying to lure him back on stage, because he's one of the finest stage actors in the country. It's true. I'm not your agent, but it's true. And Vanya came up amongst a whole lot of other.
Yeah. There were a few ideas that we were tossing around, but Vanya was the one that kind of really piqued our interest. Yeah, Chekhov's Chekhov's is really tricky to do, and I don't think Australia's had a particularly happy relationship with it over time.
Mm. What's the problem? What's the difficulty?
A lot of the time, we've inherited a kind of Anglo tradition of doing it, which is in which the pauses are sort of terribly leaden, and it starts to feel like Noel Coward without the jokes. To my mind, Chekhov's really funny. I mean, he's full of humanity, but he's also very funny. So it was important that we find a world where that was going to happen.
Well, do you as actors say, perhaps I can bring something new to this?
I think it begins with the adaptation in the end. And Andrew Upton adapted it, and he's a fine adapter of. And as we were sort of talking about before we started recording, was the difference between translation of a foreign work and an adaptation. An adaptation is done for a group of people with a director, and to try and bring fresh life, but to get as close to the original as possible. And Thomas Asher, who's one of the greatest interpreters of Chekhov, and we're very fortunate that he's directed the production, he gave a direction to Andrew at the beginning to say that that Chekhov was brutal, funny but brutal. People say you're fat, you're old, you're ugly, and we often inherit these very florid English interpretations of his work, and he wanted it to be like a pebble thrown into a pond, and he said it creates ripples, but the adaptation shouldn't be the ripples. You've got to write the stone being dropped in the pond, and the actors interpret the ripples. So it's a very plain, spare, brutal adaptation.
And that means for you as an actor?
It means that there's no kind of distance in a way between the audience and what you're giving them. So I guess the humanity of the thing is exposed, and it doesn't feel like that you're watching something of an antiquity or something of a museum piece. It's an immediate production. And I think it is brutal. I mean, what's important is that the fun and vivacity of Chekhov, which is really strong and really evident. He's Russian. Those people are fun. They're full of life. But what it means is that the highs are very high, and then when it falls away in Acts 3 and 4, there's a long way to go.
You can't help but say, this is not like the big sort of epic story that we're used to in much of our entertainment world. Mm. It's a country estate. They're sitting around moaning a lot of the time, right?
But it's very easy to make Chekhov very small, and it's epic. It's an epic.
You feel it's epic.
Well, they're epic moments in people's very small domestic lives, and I think that's the balance is opening up the time spent with those people, and having Thomas Asher direct it, he's really encouraged us to go into those silences, into what he calls the stupid pauses in life, where we're always wanting to fill moments, and he's wanting to empty all of those moments out. So you get these moments where he loved the moments when, as actors, we're thinking, my God, this pause is going on for so long, and we all start feeling incredibly awkward.
Yeah. And he loved that, and would kind of busk with that and say, see where you were there when you all felt the worst that you've ever felt. That was great.
You mean he wanted even to be longer?
Yeah, he said, play with that stuff. What's been really interesting about Tamas, and unlike a lot of directors, or most directors, in fact all directors I think I've ever worked with, what what is at odds with him is that he loves getting rid of your favourite moments. And he will do this assiduously. He'll come in and say, that bit where you do this thing that you love so much, and I can tell you love it, don't do that. And so, you know, it was interesting because we did this production a year ago, and now we've had a chance to re-rehearse it. And he didn't see quite a bit of the first production. He had to go back to Hungary. So he was watching us and he enjoyed it, but he said, you've developed all of these things and you love them. Now's the time to get rid of all of those things that you love and reinvest it and reinvent it. It was very brave.
I know, he's a bugger. It's as you suggest. Chekhov is tricky. He's as we say in Australia, he's a bugger to perform. But it's, I don't know, can I say that on American television? It means it's something slightly different in our culture. But it's very, very exposing. Yeah. And I found it the process of rehearsing it, it was a bit like doing a clowning workshop. Not that we were trying to get up there and be funny, but in the way that you've got to get up there and risk being and doing nothing. And so in the re-rehearsal of it, it's been a really interesting process because he's asking us to pare back and be in a way more mysterious and not cling on to those things that your bag of tricks, I guess you have as actors, but yet he's cast us all because of an intrinsic quality that he feels we have.
Is there an example of something from your bag of tricks that he said, you know what, that thing you love?
There's a moment where Vanya walks in on Astrov and Yelena in an embrace, and we'd all filled the moment. And I'd
really filled that moment. I had really given it some.
It's actually Andrew's favourite moment.
Was it?
The way you're able to hover on that sort of terrible
it's
precipice.
Not there anymore.
It's gone. Well, you're behind me, so I can't see it. But he wanted us to be very mysterious in that moment and to not explain for the audience how the characters were feeling. And he said that's when the audience wants to leap up on stage because they interpret and explain the moment really and understand the moment through their own prism of experience rather than what they're being. It's not described by the actors.
So in a way, it's kind of it's almost like when you read a book and you paint the characters yourself, you picture everything yourself. So I guess in the history of in my history of watching Chekhov and the interpretation of it in Australia, for instance, or even in the UK. A lot of the time when the pauses arrive, those famous Chekhovian pauses that there's so much talk about, they're invested with a solemnity or something that's apropos of something that's just happened. And so they tend to be very grave, or they're about a person thinking deeply about what's just occurred. Whereas for Tamas, it's like, no, you just got to stumble into the middle of something and everybody forgot what to talk about.
Yeah.
So you're just there.
Which is more like real life.
It's more like life, and it also, I think then as the audience, you're called upon to interpret yourself, to paint your own thing about what's that moment about. And so, I love that about it.
I saw you last year in Streetcar Named Desire when you were here in Washington, and I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about Uncle Vanya and about what you're doing with the company, with the classics. What's the trick for reinterpreting or representing classics to a contemporary audience, to make them still have life?
I think in the end there has to be an element of zeitgeist in programming, but it can't be too fashionable. And I mean, it's wonderful to have Andrew at the helm of the company because he's such a wonderful reinterpreter of it. And I think what we've been very fortunate with, say with Streetcar and now with Uncle Vanya, is having two very distinct voices, directorial voices, at the helm of both of those productions. Liv Ullmann interpreting obviously much loved Streetcar, and now Tamas Asher doing Uncle Vanya. And I think it's through the connection between a foreign work, a foreign director, and a wonderful Australian cast. And I think Australian actors are very, if you can say anything about us really, I think we're very open as performers. And so I think we leapt into that opportunity. And so it hasn't just been a dialogue with the classic work. The work has been reinterpreted through sort of an external eye.
But again, Streetcar, I mean, everybody's seen that so many times. The movie, I've seen productions of it, and then there you are, or Uncle Vanya, or any of these. And then you have to say, somehow it's new.
You have to leave your preconceptions at the door. There's a lot of baggage that comes with certain roles, in particular, and Blanche is no exception. Less so, I think, for me with Yelena, because it's not as iconic, but I'm sure that's existed with Vanya, that frankly, I think part of the incredible pathos in Vanya is that the productions I've seen is the actors have always been too old to play the role, and there's a poignancy in the fact that Richard and Hugo Weaving, who plays Astroff, are men in their prime, and the right
and they're already forgotten about. They're
Yeah.
already kind of at the end of their life, in a sense.
And so you feel the loss, you feel the passing of simply by your your age or lack thereof.
Thank you, darling. Thank you. Yes. Lack thereof. Yeah.
You both have very active film careers. Is there a difference in acting between the film and what you're doing now in an Uncle Vanya? The filling the screen in the films and the actual life person we see in front of us on stage. Is there a difference for you in approach?
It's all really the same thing. It's. I suppose you use different muscles in slightly different ways in across the media. For me, coming back and doing theatre theatre's my great love. It's where I started and it's where I'll finish. And I love it so much, and I have such a profound sense of homecoming every time I come back to it, and an ease with it, which I love. What you find working in film is that you can spend a day doing some really menial, terribly dull activity. He scratches his head and yawns and gets out of bed. He walks to the shower. He closes the door. That's 3/4 of a day in film land. And of course, that's slightly reductive. It can, all put together, it can be fantastic. But in terms of acting itself, there's nothing for me that is as wonderful and as frankly as nourishing as doing film, as doing theatre. Theatre gives back to you because you get to do it, the big thing every night, the big thing, and all of it, and that's very good for your skills as well.
I've seen where you've referred to yourself as a theatre geek.
I'm just a geek generally. Look, we both went to the same drama school, and obviously that's what we trained to do. And when we're a country of 21 million people, but still the film industry, as potent as it is, it's a cottage industry. And so I certainly didn't have any expectation that I would even make a film, nor really any ambition. And so maybe that's...
Really? Not even ambition?
No. I mean, I one of the first things I did when I got out of drama school was I was working opposite Geoffrey Rush in a production of Oleander, which was a play that hit an audience talk about zeitgeist, at the perfect timing. And it was one of the most powerful foyer experiences that I've ever had with an audience. It was, and I thought, this is actually really important. It's a socially important enterprise, putting on a play. And that doesn't always happen, but that's what you're always trying to do. And it's very immediate. And I think that's the addictive thing, is that the audience will get as much as they put into it, but also you're responsible for shaping their experience very, very tangibly. And it's a very powerful experience to have. But on a prosaic level, I hope I've become a better film actor by working in the theatre, and vice versa, in that when you work on a stage, particularly in a proscenium arch, as we're doing with Chekhov, and I think Chekhov was really designed to be performed in that frame, it helps your understanding of a wide shot. You're able to fill that wide shot. And I think likewise, I'd realised I'd been off stage for about 6 years making film, and I came back to do Hedda Gabler with the Sydney Theatre Company, which Andrew also adapted, and we took it to BAM in New York. And I realised that I'd got a greater sense of intimacy with the audience through understanding what a close-up is. And so you're constantly shaping the audience's experience of that.
I want to ask you about coming back to co-direct with your husband the theatre company. Why do that? Because surely you don't need to do that. And surely there must be headaches that come with managing
Migraines.
person.
Migraines.
Okay.
It's easy, isn't it?
It's simple.
It's easy.
Well, we were asked to apply, and it was the most left of field thing that's ever been asked of us, really. And we were so shocked by the request to apply for the job that it made us ask. We had the most fascinating discussion with each other that we were up all night talking about the potential and what could be done, and then we got frightened, and we thought, well, if we don't apply, it'll just be cowardice, and then we got the job. And I think what was great, I hope was great, was that we'd been outside the country for a decade living in the UK, and so we had a sense of objectivity about the city of Sydney and the company's potential place within the city, and it had been cut adrift somewhat. And so I think that outsider perspective was quite useful, and has been useful in our sort of approaches to where the company might be placed nationally, locally, and also internationally.
What's been interesting since Cate and Andrew have taken over is that, to my mind, the company's really opened up to the fact that Australia lives in the world. And Australia, as beautiful as it is, can tend to be an extremely insular environment. And so what's happened is that, you know, it feels that the company's opened up and it's internationalized in a way, so that for the first time, really, to my mind, people like Tamas Asher can be invited in to come and direct something, and it's an acceptance of the fact that we're a global community, and there's no point in hiding from that anymore. It is what it is, and that's a good thing, and a thing to be embraced, and for the first time that's happened in Australia, and I think it's really wonderful, because having a director like Tamas Asher come in, okay, in Australia directors can be very kind of we have some wonderful directors, but they really, you get cosseted and mollycoddled as an actor. You get told, look, that was wonderful, that was terrific, but maybe could you think about trying it like this? Just if that's okay with you. What we have in the form of Tamas Asher is a director from an old sort of European tradition who will stand and say to an older actor in the company, he'll say, when you do this moment, you shouldn't do it like that. It looks stupid. Come on instead and say this, and and this is terribly challenging to actors, because that just doesn't happen. But it's been so good for us because it's a broom and it sweeps your stuff away.
I have to ask you finally, because you've talked so much about Australia. What is it about Australia that has generated so many wonderful actors, so many of our biggest stars?
I think it's just that most people in Australia now are actors. So it's a numbers game. Most people are actors over there.
Is that how it feels?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about Australia is and something that Andrew and I were very passionate about when we came to the company, was that in the performing arts, we export a lot of individuals, a lot of successful individuals, and we were very passionate about exporting ensembles, which is part of the endeavour of taking something like Streetcar to New York and Washington and bringing Uncle Vanya back over here, and we're part of the Cultural Olympiad. We're taking a production of Botto Strauss's Gross and Klein to Vienna, Recklinghausen, London and Paris next year in a new adaptation by Martin Krimp. And so it's about getting that whole group out together, so you can get a sense of the whole rather than individual achievement, which is fantastic and should be celebrated and encouraged. But I think we're quite adventurous as performers, and I don't think we're not polite. I don't think we have for better or for worse, we don't have a sense of boundaries or boxes that we should be in. And I think that's what makes, I think, people curious about Australian performers, is you're not able to pigeonhole people as clearly. We somehow sit between or understand American culture and English culture, but we're something other. So I think it's in that something other that provides that open space to become something unique.
All right, Cate Blanchett, Richard Roxburgh, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.